Well, our first Governor's Award recipient is a legendary newsman who makes Lou Grant look a little laid back, actually. Now, before I began my writing and producing career, I worked in TV news myself, including being part of that new frontier of cable news 24 hours a day as a correspondent for CNN. So, like most of you who are in this room, I've survived the manic pace of a TV newsroom. And it's often not pretty, as most of us will attest. But what makes it bearable for reporters is when there's someone who's committed and passionate and courageous and who has that got your back even if the story's controversial kind of attitude, and who's your news director. And that, ladies and gentlemen, describes Pete Noyes. Now, there is no story that's too sacred for Pete. If it's news that affects Los Angeles or California, the nation, the world, he wants it. But most importantly, he wants it done right. And that's where his tenacity, and sometimes it's been called bullheadedness, and actually I've heard worse, where it's the stuff of mythic lore at KNXT or CBS 2, NBC 4, ABC 7, and now UPN 13. Nonetheless, reporters and anchors who have worked with him know that because he brings his A game, he raises their own level of excellence. So here's a look now.
For 50 years, Pete Noyes and the word news have been interchangeable.
If I hadn't been in this business, I'd probably been bored to death with life, you know? I mean, the business has sustained me. No, I never wanted to do anything else in life. I mean, I don't work for a living. I mean, you call that work? Going into a newsroom? I mean, that's fun. I mean, that's the joy of living.
And Pete's still living that newsroom life. He works at KCOP as the station's assignment manager. He's worked for other Los Angeles television stations too. KNXT, then KCBS when Channel 2 changed call letters. He worked for years at KNBC. The name Pete Noyes may not mean much to the average person in Los Angeles, but in the world of broadcast journalism, his name is legendary. Seen here with another legend, Edward R. Murrow, this is a guy whose name is draped with as many adjectives as years in the business. Brash, irreverent, boisterous, hell-raising, compassionate, caring, and conscientious. His unorthodox style has brought him more than his share of controversies, but if there's one thing everyone can agree on, he's a one-of-a-kind. Let's go back in time. Noyes started his career in journalism with the start of the Korean War, in the Navy, on the front lines. But his first job in news was with Stars and Stripes, dodging deadlines instead of bullets. Eventually, he hit the front lines in L.A. 5 years at City News Service on the police beat, then city editor, and then a dream job, a news writer at KNXT, Channel 2.
From the United States of America, from Los Angeles, comes the story of today, the big news.
The big news would grow in ratings and size, leaving its 15-minute format for what eventually would become the first one-hour newscast in the country. And Noyes grew with it, becoming an investigative reporter. He broke the famous drinking fountain caper at Chavez Ravine. What Noyes stumbled on became the talk of the town, and Noyes soon became the producer of the big news. He won Emmys and made headlines, writing and producing stories and documentaries like this one exposing the darker side of life along the waters of Venice and Santa Monica. It was that same powerful energy that helped break some of LA's biggest stories, including the Manson murders, which he considered at the time the crowning achievement in his career.
We were quoted on every wire service, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, all over the world.
He moved on to other stories and documentaries like this one, chronicling the life of reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes, a story Hughes didn't like and didn't want aired. He tried getting Noyes to can the show. Noyes refused. There were more headlines. The show had tremendous ratings, and Noyes continued his flight up the broadcasting ladder, going from KNXT to KABC, producing, then KNBC as managing editor, and now assignment manager at KCOP.
I've got Gigi checking with the cardinal to see if he'll talk to us, or if somebody from the archdiocese will talk.
As his colleagues look back, they see a man who's made a difference. Jess Marlowe calls him the conscience within a newsroom.
He can be forgiven a lot of his brashness and a lot of his loudness.
Modern technology. The telephone is modern technology.
I am no better, no worse than most of the reporters and news editors in town. I just operate maybe a little differently at times. I'm not ashamed of anything I've ever done in this business. I'm proud of what I've done. I have no regrets about anything I've done.
I think we'll all agree it takes a lot of guts to piss off both Howard Hughes and Charles Manson. So, well done. You know, there was one journalist who wrote to us about Pete, and I think we need to read that statement tonight. He said this is a quote: "He's perceptive, knows what the news is and how to get at it and at the heart of the story. In the many years we worked together, he made reporters and anchors look good. He's made every news department he's worked for a better place." And that's the end of the quote. We couldn't agree more with those words about Pete, which came from another exemplary newsman and a past Governor's Award winner, Jerry Dunphy. So let's bring him out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first 2002 Governor's Award recipient, Peter Noyes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sit down, relax. I was going to try to break Hal Fishman's record of 51 minutes tonight, but in the interest of brevity, I'm going to be quite brief. I guess I have to go through the usual thank yous. I want to thank Hal Eisner and Mitch Waldo, who put my name in nomination, and our news director, Larry Perrette, who had the good grace not to oppose it. My relationships with news directors over the years have been rather rocky. I know a lot of them wanted to fire me, but didn't have the guts to do it. I really, when I heard that letter from Jerry Dunphy, I almost wanted to cry. Those were the greatest years of my life in news. The big news at Channel 2. It was unbelievable. The smallest staff in town, and we had more ratings than all the other stations combined. Maury Green, great investigative reporter. Ralph Story, the greatest storyteller I've ever known. Bill Keane, the king of all weathermen. And of course, Gil Stratton on sports. But the man who put that team together, you don't even know who he is. His name was Sam Zellman. He was a broadcasting genius. He hired me. But he is the man who wrote and handed it to Jerry Dunphy, from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, a good evening. Sam's about 89 years old now and still living in Phoenix, Arizona. God bless you, Sam. We wish you were here tonight. I'm also humbled by the fact that I'm sharing this award with the greatest sportscaster in the United States, Chick Hearn. If I had a vote, I would have voted for Chick, and I mean it. Now, despite all of that, what's gone through in my past life, producing news shows, fighting with news directors, I've enjoyed every job I've had in Los Angeles. Even though at times my mouth has gotten me into considerable trouble, especially with general managers who like to be regarded as sacred cows. Hey, say it like it is. We had a general manager at Channel 2. I think he was a car salesman before he got the job, and then he became a journalist. The thing I've always enjoyed most is investigative reporting. And I was motivated by three very different people. The legendary Bill Stout, whose investigative reports on Channel 2 in the 1950s were real barn burners, an exceptional investigative reporter. Then there was Jack Tobin, the brilliant investigative reporter for the Los Angeles Times, who taught me everything I needed to know about searching for public records. Jack was a genius, a genius. We lost him a couple of years ago. I talked to him nearly every day I was at work, checking out stories, running ideas past him. He would run them past me. But then there's a third person I don't think many of you have heard about, and his name was Clifford Clinton. Not Bill, Clifford Clinton. Clinton was the foreman of the LA County Grand Jury in 1937 when he discovered that Los Angeles city government was corrupt from top to bottom. If you wanted a building permit, you had to bribe the city council. Clinton discovered there were 600 houses of prostitution in the city. That's right, 600. All operating with approval of the Vice Squad, the LAPD Vice Squad. And if a cop wanted a promotion, he had to pay for it. $500 for the rank of sergeant, $1,000 for lieutenant. The powers that be, of course, were very unhappy with Mr. Clinton, so they bombed his home. Luckily, the family was gone at the time. And he didn't have anybody he could trust in the DA's office or in the police department, so he went out and hired an honest ex-cop, a guy named Harry Raymond, a brilliant investigator. Guess what happened to Harry? They bombed his car. But Harry Raymond survived, and despite the fact that he had 100 pieces of shrapnel in his body, he testified before the grand jury, and it was the first step in bringing down the establishment in Los Angeles. Incidentally, that bomber turned out to be an LAPD lieutenant who went to prison for 10 years. But this was the turning point in changing the city's political landscape. I love LA. I love what it is today with all its warts. I want to thank my wife of 42 years for putting up with me. My son is here tonight, a night assignment editor at Channel 2. His wife and my two beautiful granddaughters, whom I love very much. So let me conclude by saying one man can make a difference. And that's what every one of us should strive for day in and day out in the business of news gathering, making a difference. I thank the Academy for honoring me tonight. I have been truly blessed in my career, and I thank all of you for making this night possible.